We will now start with the last session from our program from this annual conference. And it is my pleasure to welcome to our conference Dr. Irina FILONOVA. And we invited Dr. FILONOVA to offer us a seminar in our annual conference. And I am very, very glad that Dr. FILONOVA accepted our challenge. And she's here today to give us some good insights and some good advices, I hope, about good science communication. Now, before I give the microphone entirely to Dr. FILONOVA, I will just briefly introduce her to the audience. So Dr. Irina FILONOVA is the founder of the PhD Whisperer, an evidence-based coaching and training company specializing in the professional development of global PhDs. With over 50 training engagements worldwide, Dr. Irina excels in topics ranging from mastering interpersonal skills to leveraging AI tools in one's job search. Dr. Irina's expertise also covers the unique challenges of cross-cultural communication, science leadership, and research team dynamics. Previously, Dr. Irina has worked as an academic developer at OIST in Japan, helping scientists from over 40 countries to overcome workplace and career challenges. It is my pleasure to pass the floor to you, Irina, and I am extremely excited and looking forward to see what you have prepared for us when it comes to science communication. So by all means, please, you can start.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm just so glad to hear. I joined during the last talk and I heard the importance of the professional networking through the HIRAKU-Global program. And just my heart was filled with joy, honestly. So thank you so much for putting this wonderful, wonderful program together, because it's so important. And I know I stand between you and a very long holidays of celebration. So I'll try to be as entertaining as possible, not annoying and not preachy. So let me just share my screen to make sure everybody can see it. Okay.
Yes, everything's working.
Wonderful. And so thank you for the introduction, George. It's again, pleasure. So I typically do my presentations. I liked a little bit of interactions. If I were in person, I would be looking at your raised hands and some sort of nodding so I can read the audience and tailor my message. I can't quite do it here, but what I can do, I can offer you to interact with me within maybe first 10 to 15 minutes through Poll Everywhere. If you can go to, it says Communication Across the Borders, polleverywhere.com/IrinaF897, and just contribute a couple of answers here and there. I know we have 55 participants. You don't have to answer. I think my slots are up till 25. But if you feel compelled to participate until it says the activity is full, please feel free to do so. We're going to talk about communication across the borders, and this is one of my favorite topics because I started my career as a linguist or a storyteller. And then I moved to neuroscience. I'm trained as a neuroscientist, then moved to coaching. And you know what? The kind of gist of my career, my personal life, was collecting the stories, listening to people, and just really being in awe what science and scientists can offer. So let us begin with a slide that says, how do you feel about science communication? And a little bit of warning. So I think Poll Everywhere just did something with their free account. So if you just go in there and it says, the activity is full, just keep trying. So I see 100% people feeling yay about science communication. Okay, so May is going there. Exciting. And I'm just going to wait just a little bit here. I know we are running out of time. It's the last talk for today. Wonderful. Okay, so we're getting there. Smiley faces. And I posed the same question about the team research as I talked to some of the fantastic researchers from this program on Tuesday. Okay, so fairly positive about science communication. I'm glad that there's no sad faces and no purple faces, that I never know what they actually mean. So my title of the talk is Communication Across the Borders. And I'm really curious, what does that mean for you? If you think about the borders that might prevent you as a researcher or even administrator or a global citizen to communicate clearly with the public and each other, what would they be? Visible and invisible borders. Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for contributing. So we'll sit here for just a couple of minutes. Yeah, language. And I came across the language barrier when I moved to Japan 7 years ago. And I will disappoint everybody right now. Despite of my 5 attempts, I could not master Japanese language, not even to the kanji katakana workable style. Yes, language is one of the barriers. And I was so excited to see the HIRAKU-Global participants and cohorts just communicating very fluently in English. And even the presentations and the questions were fantastic. Yes, language. Busy, we're very busy. There's some cultural barriers, right? When we start communicating, what I mean might not mean the same thing to you. There's some sort of differences. Ooh, I love the habit. There's something about habit. There's something about being shy. Okay, so there's something scientific discipline, and busy is coming up. And I can only assume as the young faculty members, right, just coming up stars, there's no time. You have to deal with managing the lab, publishing, grant acquisition, busy. Where's the time for science communication, especially with the public? Academic world, discrimination. Yes, there's internal barriers and there are external barriers. Yes, so there's a lot of things here, but we are talking about communication, right? So there is a request from Japanese government, there's request for funding agencies to talk about science. So why does that matter? In your opinion, what is the reason you're here listening to me talking about science communication? Why is it important? Yes, we want to share knowledge, absolutely. To show what we do. What is the reason behind this? We want to have a breakthrough discoveries. Knowledge transmission. Fantastic. Get some new ideas. So I'm here, there's a value between just developing science, generating new ideas, some sort of get support. We want to communicate when support is needed for our research. Make public people to be involved. Absolutely. Exchange ideas, develop new technologies, because how do we know what other people are doing? Of course, networking. So I teach networking for scientists, and this is clear. Communication is absolutely the foundation. Sure, we're not med scientists. Thank you for putting this out there. This is my favorite one. When I teach careers, I always say we really need to communicate to others that we're just not mad, right? There's not such a thing. Wonderful. Solve problem, expand collaborative studies. Yes, yes, and yes. At the same time, we also want to honor our society. And I got this data from Statistics Bureau of Japan. Believe it or not, 21 million yen is spent per researcher. At least it was in 2022. And every year, this number is growing. So the public trusts us with their money, with their tax money, and we want to pay back somehow. At the same time, so this communication is built into something that we're very familiar. It's scientific method. I hope you recognize this framework from your, maybe middle school, high school, when you were just be aspiring scientist. This is what we do: identify the questions, review literature, formulate hypotheses, design experiment, collect data. For me, these are the most exciting parts. Then analyze it, come to the conclusion. The process goes on. And what is this question mark? The question mark is dissemination. As you mentioned in the previous slide, building ideas, innovating, exchanging, pushing the knowledge of humanity requires dissemination. And what is dissemination if not communication in a nutshell? But something is happening in our scientific world. We want to communicate, right? The number of papers are increasing dramatically, yet we find this article, and this is back in 2015, that says when we look at the scientific papers, in this case, UN climate reports, they are increasingly unreadable, not only to the public who has no scientific background, but to our peer scientists. So what's going on here? So we want to communicate, we're trying to communicate. What is the goal of communication, of scientific one, in your opinion? What's happening? So we're trying to communicate, but it's not working out. So what's the goal here? Pass on the message. To recognize scientific discoveries, to recognize us. I'm assuming, I'm just going to make some assumptions here. What else? Sometimes we communicate because somebody told us to communicate and to come to HIRAKU-Global to present our data. That happens. What else? Let public understand cutting-edge science. We're letting them do it. What else is there? To share our passion. Absolutely. To develop new technologies, right? It's again, so this ultimate goal of communication, to face world problems. And I just see these are big ones. Let others know that you've done your results, your impact. So just think about a lot of this. It's about you, right? Transmitting something. Satisfaction. Yeah, that's a good one. Ask for opinion and feedback. Wonderful. And we can just have lists go on and on and on. But I want you to start thinking, what is this ultimate goal when you're going into communication without yourself? And it's about being understood. You come in, and how do you know the communication succeeded? Typically, when the other person on the other side going like this, yeah, I got you. I hear you. The person is being understood and being listened to, no matter what you're saying. And if that doesn't happen, we typically get in a scenario. Let's say I want to talk about the sharks. I have the shark on my mind. I know about the sharks, and I'm just telling you about the sharks. But the way I'm doing this for myself. I want to transmit some sort of knowledge. But then the listener sitting there and it's like, okay, well, that sounds like a squid, right? There's some sort of breakdown in communication despite of all our effort. And the results are dire. So we can see that from the Pew Research Center, and this is very recent, November 14, 2023, and I'm going to talk about Americans here, right? But we see this trends all over the place, that people don't trust scientists. The trust in academic institutions all over the world continue to decrease. And we can see it, and we saw it during pandemic, when it was the whole controversy in Europe and in Asia about mask wearing. We said, scientific community said, here's the data, masks are really good for you. They will prevent the spread of COVID. We had data. What happened? Let's say in the United States, there were demonstrations. It was taken as some sort of impeachment on the freedom. People disregarded it. And of course, we can say, well, this is something away in a different country across the ocean, but let's look what was happening in Japan. I'm in Okinawa, so I don't have the trains, but I can see this. So yes, scientists work with the government, put these beautiful brochures, No, we're not doing social distance. Yeah, no, we're doing social distancing. We're not hanging out, wearing masks. And the mask compliance was fantastic. Yet, when you went to Tokyo subway, you still saw people coming together. So what's happening there? So what are we not communicating? Is it people who are not willing to listen? Maybe not. So this is a paper that's still in preprint from 2024. There was a survey done with 70,000 people from 67 countries, and they were asking about engagement. What would you like researchers and scientists to do in terms of transfer their knowledge to people? And so we're looking at 5 strongly agree, 4 agree. So let's check it out. The public thinks that we researchers should work with politicians to integrate scientific results in policymaking. Not only that, we should participate in the policymaking progress. Over 50% of 70,000 people think that. But the kicker is here. People want us to communicate science with general public, not 50%, but 80+%. So scientists are willing to communicate. Public is willing to listen. So what is the problem? Once again, what's happening here? In your opinion, why are so many scientists generally, and I'm not saying everybody's bad, are not very good at communicating their results to different audiences? Why is when you go to the scientific presentation, it's not very exciting, or people get lost and they don't want to engage? Education. Yes, we were never coached to do that. There was no training how to really simplify the ideas. Need huge background to reach results. Yep, lack of scientific knowledge and interest. Not being taught, right? I'm seeing like this little kind of like the gap, technical terms. Too many, jargon. Don't we love that? And we'll talk about jargon here because I hope I'll give you a little bit tips and tricks how to make your message better. Yes, we need make science simple. And guess what? You're in charge of your message. It's difficult to imagine the knowledge in public people. No time and shy. Yes, it goes back to, right, in the very beginning. So I am too busy to go to the training. I'm just too busy to spend this time simplifying message. We operating in this complex terms and complex environment. I hear you, absolutely. Yes, once again. And, we can put it in these 3 curses, and there is nothing scary about this. But these are the curses that might prevent us scientists to communicate better, to express our ideas better. And absolutely, I acknowledge there is no time in young faculty or in researchers. The pressure of publish and perish is incredibly high. So what are those 3 curses? The first one is the curse of knowledge. We're so familiar with our subject that we assume that everybody else on the same page. So why would we tailor the communication? Because in our head, we're talking to each other, to ourselves, and it's super clear. But in the reality, when we describe our research to grant agency, guess what? There's no mini-me sitting there at the same level of your research. When you're talking to high schoolers about science and careers, it's not you who you're talking to. You just know too much. And I think you reflected it in the previous slide. There's also this curse of lost passion. I think many scientists just don't think their research is interesting. Yes, some discoveries are cool. We had this oligomerization and going to the US, fantastic. But day to day, doing Western blots, purifying proteins, doing things again and again, it's just plain boring. We don't think this is something interesting we can share. And I remember during the graduate school, I did a lot of electrophysiology. And I was like, oh, another experiment. And now I teach undergraduate biology course. And sometimes I tell my students about the slices and how I was able to listen neurons talking to each other. And they are in awe. I forgot how it is not know. So we can absolutely share these moments and excite the public. And the third one is the curse of forgetfulness. Right? So who do we communicate? We communicate with peers. We sit in the ivory tower. We're trying to put the grants out. We're trying to publish in high impact journals. And we are communicating with those people. but public is different. And as some of you mentioned before, their knowledge is different. And we just forget how it is not known. However, every single person who is sitting in this room pretty much is aware what is the good, the bad, and the ugly of communication. You have been at the presentations when you just went in and you said, wow, that was really good. At the same time, you were at the presentations when you went and you said, okay, so probably never again. So how would you describe good communication in 3 to 5 adjectives? It's something positive. What else? It's refreshing, simple, easy, concise, it's interesting, understandable. Oh, I love the simplicity. And especially if we're talking about the language, right? So why would we want to use these complicated English words when we can say things in a very simple manner? Okay, interesting, refresh. I love refreshing. I haven't seen this word a lot. Thank you for putting it there. Yeah, fun. It's a sexy communication about sexy topics, right? In science. Attractive, audience friendly, relatable. So we'll talk about relatable. Yes, absolutely. So it's great to see it. And as a confirmation, I'm going to move to the next slide. I gave very similar talk at Kyoto University like years ago. And this is what your peers said about good communication. Simple, informative, interesting, humorous, clear. It doesn't matter who you ask across the borders, people know how it looks like. What about bad communication? So, okay, let's think about the last time we went to the presentation or a talk and we thought, oh, long, like Irina is talking. We have to go. It's the emperor's birthday tomorrow. Long. It's all about long, sleepy, complex, complicated, looking down. That's an interesting one. So there's a big distance between the speaker and the audience. A lot of jargon. It's difficult. What else is there? Not to the point. Attacking, especially during Q&A, right? So when people not necessarily, don't you love when people say, I have a question at the end of your presentation, and they're going to give you the comment and criticism, and you'll be like, what's the question there? But what I can see, it's long, one-sided, difficult, sleep-inducing, soporific, as I would say. No smiling, just reading the script. Reading the script when people's like, let me tell you about my slides, and they're super complicated. Long is here. Exactly. So, and just confirm what we see here. Complicated, unclear, long, boring, monotonous, difficult. Oh, you just want to sleep, right? So we know how good and bad communication look like. And yet, more likely than not, we're defaulting into something boring, monotonous. We're more likely to reuse that poster that we used 3 years ago because we don't have the time and we just need to put something there. So let's kind of, during this presentation, just really think about how we can just make 1 or 2 adjustments to the way we do things based on this presentation or your peer experiences here. So communication in a nutshell consists of speaker, audience, and message. And there's 3 things that you can control, nothing else. Audience will talk about this. So this is how I look at it, a very complicated graph. Here's the speaker. The speaker is going to present, and it could be grant agencies, whatever your audience is. And here's the audience just ready to listen, and the speaker has a message, blah, 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 whatever the message is. And the message is being thrown at the audience. And typically, this is where many people think communication ends. But that's not true, right? Because the audience continuously giving you feedback, unless you, like me, looking at the screen and looking at the camera, and it's very difficult to get some sort of feedback. But even then, you can ask. So it's 2-way communication. In addition, you have the environment. Somebody can play music outside. There could be constructions. So while you can't not control the environment, you can acknowledge saying, Well, you know what? The music is playing very loudly, but you know what? That's the situation. You can control your message, how you're presenting, and you can really control how you influence the audience. And this is where the communication is the synergy between connection and clarity. Your connection with the audience. Can you relate to them? And can you clarify your message? And with clarity, I mean, can you do what we just did on the slides, right? Make it fun, make it clear, make it simple, make it understandable. And when this connection happens, there's magic. And in neuroscience, we call it neural coupling. When we are in sync with the audience, guess what? Our brains synchronize as well. I don't know if you experienced that, especially it's in person, when all of a sudden it feels like you and your audience are in sync and you have this great eye connections, you have this great eye contact, your bodies are in sync, everybody's leaning forward, and it's really miraculous. How do we make it happen? So it's very simple. At this point, as I said, right, there's three parts: audience, message, and yourself as a speaker. The message has two parts, and we're going to walk through all of them, hopefully giving you a little bit of tips, a little bit of tricks, and if we are on time, there might be some time for questions. Know your audience. If anything, you're just going to walk away and forget about this presentation. What I want to deliver here, my key message: communication, it's never about you. If you want to be understood, if you want to be listened to, you need to really leave yourself behind. What you need to do, how you need to do it, and really focus on your audience, from you to them. Because typically we think, so I'm the writer, I'm the communicator, I'm going to do these things and I'm going to send it into the air, and it's up to the audience to decide. And if the audience doesn't like it, guess what? They just didn't get it. But it's not that. And I invite you to think about your message is, and kind of this situation as like you are throwing a ball to a 5-year-old. So I have a 19-year-old dad, but when he was 5 and he had very weak coordination here and there, I was trying to just throw him a ball. What did I do? I didn't just like toss it at him. I carefully looked at my child. I was listening with my eyes, with my ears, with my body. I was trying to sync, right? And then when I knew that he was ready, I was pretty much giving it to him. And he caught it. And this is, as a speaker, this is your message. This is what you're trying to do. This is the opposite too. If you go to round 1, and if you like ping pong, you have these machines or tennis machines. When you have this machine automatic and it just throw the ball every 6 to 4 seconds and you trying to bounce it or catch it. Look at the people. Do they look relaxed and happy? No, they look stressed out. And this is how many of the scientific presentations are. Instead of just kind of giving you the message, simplifying it, really guiding you to get it, you have a person who is just throwing those 57 points at you. And if you didn't get it, it must be your fault. So how can you be the guiding speaker? Well, first, you really need to understand your audience, what motivates them, what are the value, why they're here to listen to you. You can do your homework to understand their motivation, and then it doesn't matter whether it's online or in person or grants, you can always ask questions and listen. And sometimes this is not accessible, but it is. So what can we do in terms of do the homework, right? It's easier said than done. Sometimes when I do my presentations and I recommend to my clients, so just think about your audience expertise, their motivation, their interest, and their attitude. The categories could be anything you want, and it's low to high. And these are subjective, right? It's not even going to collect the data and just do this, some sort of analysis, running statistical software. No. So let's take a look. Language. You're speaking about fish evolution to public. What is their expertise, motivation, and interest? The expertise is probably very low, but motivation might be just in the middle. They're really interested to see a real scientist, the interest might be high, especially if you just came up with a discovery, say the dinosaurs evolved into fish, right? And the attitude, it really depends if they trust or not trust you. How about this? You're speaking about fish evolution to biologists. Think about expertise. At 7 p.m. on a Friday night before holidays. That changes, right? So just like I'm speaking to you and there's just a few more minutes and you can say, phew, I'm done. I'm going to have a wonderful 3-day weekend. So the expertise are high, motivation could be very low, while some of the interest will be, yes, I would like to know more about the discoveries. Attitude can vary. And this is for you to acknowledge this. If you're in the situation, just say, you know what? Yes, I know you're tired. I know you need to go. Let's hang in there together and do our best. But just simply acknowledging and listening to your audience, they will appreciate and they will give you your attention. Again, so why do they want to listen to scientists or researchers? We know 70,000 people, 67 countries. 80% of them want you to communicate the research. But why? Why do they care? Well, they care for a variety of reasons. And knowing those reasons, it really will help you to tailor the message once again. Practical reasons. They might want to know what's the recent cancer treatment? What's the recent thought on AI? Or your collaborators want to see what you've been done and what you have not been doing recently. A lot of the time, public just wants to be inspired. They're giving you money, taxpayer money. They just want to be in awe. And because they care about you as a human speaker. They're human behind it. And it's really up to you to make them relate. Of course, like you do not know who I am. If you're going somewhere to speaker, of course, if it's a Nobel laureate, you might read something, but typically people have no idea who you are. And how do you make them care? You use empathy. This is one of the best way to just get them to care about you. Let them stand in your shoes as a scientist. Tell them personal stories, little anecdotes. How did you do it? How did you feel? How does that feel to be you? All of a sudden, you increase this human connection and they just really want you succeed. And people do want you to succeed. At the same time, what can you do in exchange? Again, not just bouncing and pouncing these balls on them and just throwing things at them, but step in their shoes and really realize how it is to be them. They're sitting maybe in the cold auditorium. Maybe there is no time. Maybe something is going on politically, right? So just by stepping in each other's shoes, you really having the different picture and you connecting, you relating, increasing your message. So let's say you know the audience. What about the message? A lot of the time, this is where we focus. Audience is there, taken for granted. Self, we don't want to know, but the message. So each message has a goal. And the goal really depends. The goal is not, I need to present because I was told to do so. The goal is clear, appropriate, timely, and it's about, did I say it, my key message? It's about the audience. We know from coaching research, any other research, if you have the goal and you visualize the goal, you're more likely to succeed it. So when we're going into communication, we need to be very clear what it is. We want to be clear how many talking points we're going to communicate. Not 10, probably 2 to 3, and just these are our key messages that we want to repeat them over and over and over again. Our attention span is small, so we just really want to do it. So how do we select that key message? How do we select the goal? A good way to think about this is, what do you want your audience to know about your research? How do you want them to feel? And what do you want them to do? Very straightforward and very easy. For example, if you are applying, let's say you have a public presentation town hall meeting. What do you want them to know? Probably the foundational knowledge about your research and how cool it is, why it is important for them. You probably want them to feel excited, inspired, just go Google you and just maybe tell people about your presentation. What do you want them to do? Spread the word. The same thing goes for the granting agency. You want them to know your research, not all of it, but how it's related to the goal. Very simply, you want them to feel that they can trust you. And what do you want them to do? Give you money. So it really varies. But with the goal, it's a good way to guide your message to completion. The best goal practices, outward facing, right? Think about where your message is going. It needs to be realistic and strong. What I mean by realistic, I don't know if you've had this experience or you've seen this. You go to a conference and then a person comes in and they have 15 minutes and they just happen to have 100 very complicated slides. So they start talking, 5 minutes, they only went through 2. And instead of stopping and saying, you know what, I have too many slides, I have 5 minutes left. What would you like to know about my research? What do people do? Click, 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 and you have no idea what happened. So be realistic. How many slides you have? What is your message? What is the key point and the time? So once you have the goal, now this is the meat of your presentation. Again, it can be applied for the networking, for your global collaborations, or any public engagements. For the content, we really want to start thinking what keeps us engaged as Homo sapiens, not scientists. We're going to do the base level. So what keeps us engaged is the connection to people, something that we remember, something that we know, clarity, and most importantly, it's the story. It's the narrative story. Why do we gravitate towards stories? It's very easy. For thousands of years, we have evolved as tribal creatures. We didn't have the language, the verbal, the written language for a very long time. So how did we pass the knowledge? We sat around the fire or we sat around the food thing and we were just telling each other stories. And what's the best story? Not about details and facts. The best story, these are your folk stories, myths full of danger, full of emotions, analogies, vividness. That's the story. And science has all of it built into it. So the story in the science, right? Or just maybe general myths, Hollywood movies, any type of movies. It's someone wants something and tries to get it. And if you look at Russian folk stories, that's where it starts, and it makes no sense why somebody went to get something through all the obstacles. Something hangs in the balance, good and evil. That's a good one, right? And then there's a turning point, something has changed, and we can put the story narrative into a very simple structure. There's a question, there's a suspense, right? We're just kind of sitting, eating popcorn. There's a turning point, and then we can relax. There's a resolution. Scientists know how to write this story. For many years, there were no governmental institutions to fund the research. So scientists needed to go and ask money from common people to do autopsies, to buy the microscopes, to design different things. So they invented something that's called IMRAD. And IMRAD stands, wait, for Introduction, Methods, Result, and Discussion. What is it? That's the structure of your scientific paper. Very clear, very logical. But something has happened once again in the 21st century. And we're looking at the paper here from 1975 that says that medical obfuscation, I don't even know what that is real. Obfuscation is where you can't quite understand the terms are used to describe different events. That's not going to help you to create clear narrative. What does? So we are here to undo all hundreds of years recently or decades of obfuscation. How do we do this? I offer the simple method, didn't create by me. I can't take a credit. I wish I did. By Dr. Randy Olson from his book, Houston, We Have Narrative, who was a PhD in science turned filmmaker. So he proposed this very simple structure. A, but, therefore. Why? If we look at the narrative spectrum, many cases of scientific communication between scientists or at the presentation go like this. I did this, I got the reagents, I went there, I got collaborators, and then I did this experiment, and it's boring. If you have a friend, I have a great friend of mine, this is how this friend talks. And within 15 minutes, I really want to know about the research the person is doing, but then I feel super bored. On the other side of the spectrum is despite, however, yet. When you're trying to tell a person all the details, all your way of thinking, and you go, yes, we did this, yet it didn't work out. However, but despite, and the person gets so confused. Well, they're not bored. They're just really vigilant. They're very confused. It's just too much of a story. A good way to think about this, it's and, but, therefore. It makes it interesting. And this is, again, you have the question, you have some sort of turning point, and then you have resolution. You can use it for your grants, for introductions to collaborations, or elevator pitch when you are doing this initial networking and small talk. And the elevator pitch, it would look like we identify several potential targets and we had funding. You're just giving just a little bit of a story. But here is the tension. We didn't have appropriate equipment nor expertise. Therefore, we established interdisciplinary collaboration. It's very easy. It's very clean. You have 1 or 2 sentences, and now I'm clear what you are, who you are, and what you're looking for. It takes some practice to put this in, just to get used to it. And so what I hear, okay, Irina, I have this ABT, but I can't find my story. Everything I do is just boring and it's very mundane. Remember those curses? So the stories are all over us. It's the problem you're trying to solve, the inspiration when you were a kid. How did you get into science? You can absolutely turn this into a little tiny anecdote before your presentation to engage your audience. What was your luckiest discovery? And what was your biggest setback or failure? In science, we don't talk about setbacks and failures. Yet, when you listen to famous scientists, they'll tell you about luck, about mistakes that led to prestigious awards. So we do want to create some sort of journal of negative results, right? When we can talk about the setbacks, because this is where the rich data is. So let's say you found this story. How do you craft to make it good? And I think you have hit on all the points. We want to keep it simple. Avoid jargon and use everyday language. Remember when I asked you about the cross barriers, or what are the barriers to communication? Language came first. Use simple language. What prevents us from doing this? Why are we using the jargon? So here is how a jargon might look like to a person who doesn't speak your scientific language. And as I'm just going through the slide, I'm wondering if you can figure out what that is. When you look at something, it looks like English, it looks like structure that you should be able to understand, but you can't. You feel disengaged, you might feel frustrated or stupid. And what it says here, I am fluent in pig's Latin. So next time, when you're trying to use jargon, your scientific discipline, and there's a place for it, but in a general sense, just be very careful with this, because jargon alienates. It doesn't bring people together. You're making the story simple. You're also making it memorable, but being vivid, using analogies and metaphors and examples and emotions, right? Just like this little donut. So first it's plain, and then you start putting these little tiny sprinkles. And what are the emotions? So science says we need to be objective. Yes, we need to be objective when we do our research. We don't want to have any bias. But when we go to communicate, it's a different story. You want to engage. You want to be heard. You want to be understood. And we understand emotions. You want to get more brain areas, not only your process in the language, but also emotions, to get the message more memorable. So you can say, well, DNA is like a ladder with different steps. And if one step is broken, that's your mutation or anything. Sometimes it's very difficult to come up with analogous metaphors. Guess what you can do? ChatGPT or any other AI. You can put your research and say, brainstorm with me different analogous metaphors I can use to communicate my message better, and see what happens. Simple, memorable, credible. We are scientists, right? We want to use fact, numbers, authorities, but not too much. Your reputation, expertise, experience matters, but not too much. Otherwise, it's very easy to alienate your public. If you give them a table that contains 177 numbers, well, maybe you should go with just 3, the most important ones. Again, the best vegan bagel, 123 calories. You don't want to tell people anything more about this. You might want to provide additional information saying, here's where you can find more of, but just keep it, again, simple. Don't bury the lead. Tell people about the big picture, even if you're talking with other scientists, not technicalities. I see many of PhDs get really trapped in details and they forget about why they're doing this. And people who are not in their field or in their field, but in not their lab, they're just looking at them saying, what's so what of your message? And it's very important, especially when you talk to public, because as scientists, and you look at this, this beautiful graphic from Ivory Tower, Escape from the Ivory Tower. So with scientists, we are given a lot of background, justification, result, and conclusion, tiny conclusion. What public cares is the opposite. The public wants to hear why. Why is it important for me? So what? And then give appropriate supporting details. Flipping the narrative, it's incredibly important. And again, once you follow these steps, you have a simple message. Remember this little donut? If you look at the big picture, maybe it was about the date. It wasn't about a person on a diet. So just draw it vividly and let people decide what details they want by asking you questions. One thing on the cultural perspective here. There is a work in the book, The Culture Map by Erin Myers. And I really like it because she breaks down culture in different dimensions. And again, we're not taking it as stereotypical, Russians or Japanese or US, but just kind of as a guide when we're trying to especially persuade our public. So there's some cultures that have principle first persuasion, and other ones are application first. So how does it look? If you are in the principle first culture, trying to pitch something there, you start with fact, still bottom line first, but there's more fact and statement. You have opinions and bigger picture and concepts probably later. On the other side, when the cultures are application first, like the US, venture capitalists, you just draw a huge picture, right? Like, this is how we're going to get to the stars, and this is the translation. And then you backing up your statement with facts. Very similar to what I showed on the other picture, how we just go in this bottom line first. So while we're not going to have it as a rule of thumb, this is really good to keep in mind that depending on the culture, depending on the discipline, we might need to adjust the message a bit more. So now we know the audience, the message. Why do we care about self? And self is important because each person is an iceberg. What you see is just a little bit on the top, the way they are, the way they communicate. But there's so many beliefs about communication, about values, about culture, where we're coming from, good or bad, how it is to be as a speaker, how it is to present a message. And we want to know what might prevent us from doing our best. And what I call in coaching, we do a lot of it, it's building awareness around strengths and weaknesses, right? Just think about this iceberg. What we're doing, we're just uncovering more and more and more. What are your strengths as communicator? Is it humor? Is it big picture, gestures, connectedness? What are the areas for development? Do you speak too fast? Is your voice shaking? What is that? Once you're aware, you can do something about this. Also, cultural attitude. Are you more prone to hierarchical way of thinking or just more flat? So this way, it really depends how you present your message, and especially motivations and the goals. We've talked about the goal of your message that is for your audience, right? But what about you? What is your motivation here to talk to that specific person, that specific group of people? With grants, it could be obvious, right? I need money for my research. With public speaking, to just lay audience might not be. What is the reason you're there? Because you were told, which is not going to go good, or because you really want, because your value is dissemination and you really want people to know about your knowledge? Or is it because you want to be famous on the social media and to get a lot of likes and interviews and you're building your brand, which is very valid. However, if this is what you're going for, you need to be very careful around controversial topic. So what do we have in universities? We have science communication departments that interview scientists and they just really want everybody to know about your research. If you're in topics such as stem cells, climate change, AI, genome editing, CRISPR-Cas, right? It's controversial. It's very easy to get carried away providing your opinions because you're a scientist, you're a PhD. People look up at you and they might say, well, Irina, what's your outlook on the politics, or what's your outlook on the social issue? I'm a coach. I'm a former neuroscientist. The only thing I can do to protect myself from this is to stay inside my expertise, to avoid controversies. It's very easy to get in because guess what the media is looking for? They're looking not for facts, sometimes they're looking for stories. And the best stories are when something is taken out of context. If you're engaging with social media, if you're having an interview, make sure that you know what the rules of engagements are. Will you be able to read the draft of the interview before it goes on so you're not surprised? Is it recorded? What are the policies around this? So really stay inside. There's temptation to say, well, I'm hypothesizing that XYZ. If it's not your expertise, don't go there. The last thing I want to pose here is this word called glossophobia. If you've never heard about this, this is a fancy word for fear of public speaking. And I want to share a little secret with you. I had a terrifying fear of public speaking with social anxiety. I almost didn't get my bachelor's degree because I could not just talk in front of people. My voice would shake, my accent would get very thick. It was a disaster. And at one point when I was in graduate school, I had a choice to just practice and practice and practice again. And at one point, I gave up my anxieties and I thought, wow, I really, really like what I'm doing. I just really want to have people admire science, not mine, but anybody else's. And so I found this strength. My strength was humor and connection and just simplifying the messages. And now I'm here to share what I've learned for the last 10, 15 years with you. And I really invite you just to take it easy, take it simple, and just make it as fun. Yes, there's fear of public speaking, but we just want to cross it out of our vocabulary. We don't want this fancy word. What we want is to follow simple rules, is to really know the audience, connect with them, listen to them, understand it's not about you, and just craft this message that's very clear, concise, full of vivid, memorable, and simple concept, and then just know yourself. And once you get there, something magical happens. And the magic is the audience will give you this attention. The most valuable thing they have is their time. And I really hope that you'll have this opportunity just to move forward and engage with the public. They're waiting for you. They're waiting for your research. And I think you're the right person to do it. starting now. So that's the end of my presentation. And so we can open the floor to any questions just thrown out there. So there's a couple of books that I really like, especially by Alan Alda about science communication. ABT Narrative Came from Houston, We Have Narrative, TED Talks, and other books. If anybody's interested, find me on LinkedIn, connect with me, and I'd be more than happy to provide any resources that you might wish to have. So I think that's all for me.
Irina, thank you very, very, very much. This was really, really interesting. I actually have one question for you, only one, and it's from close to the beginning when you started this seminar, and you mentioned this that it is important to integrate or to connect scientists and politicians to have a connection that becomes fruitful. And I have a sort of a provocative comment on this.
Please.
I think such a connection between, researchers and scientists and politicians could also be quite negative because it could impair our independence. It could somehow condition our research agendas because politics could, exert a negative influence and limit what we could do, and limiting the freedom in science is a sin in my view. So it could be dangerous, don't you think so?
That's a great question. So it could be dangerous, and I never thought about this way, because the way I think about this is just our responsibility to communicate, right, and say, this is what we have. Look at our research, right? Not just kind of following what they tell us, like this is where we're going to find this project and we're kind of following in. For me, it's more probably, maybe I'm just too optimistic and naive. So
maybe you're romantic, yes. So, for example, following a little my example, imagine a more right-wing government.
I don't want to imagine that.
That would have some sort of hold onto our research agendas. We don't want that, right? So we want to preserve some of our freedom to be able to do research on possibly more controversial topics that deserve some researching. That was my point that I was trying to make.
Yeah. That's a good point. Can I stay within my expertise of communication and not go into the politics? I have a couple of thoughts. Yes, I do. yes, I do. But I'm going to kindly just, weave myself out. I still think, politicians and people at the local and high government, they do not know what we do. People really have not seen any scientists. They have no idea how the science is done. Why is it so expensive? And so maybe for us just to communicate it in this way. I understand you're talking about this agendas and how it is, and maybe I'm looking at this just one little step at a time, more ground up levels that, just really increasing awareness. Because a lot of the time people have no idea, right? So why do we spend money on research? Why do we spend money on education if they have never seen how research is done? So, and this is maybe this is for me, this is what I want. And you really look at studies, people want to hear from us. People want to trust us. But because of the social media, and this is a different conversation, there's such a huge breakdown in trust right now. And I think it's our responsibility as global citizens and scientists just to really try to build it. And you don't have to go to even like high politics, local communities, right? Like one circle at a time to expand and just awareness of that.
Yeah. Of course, I just threw a hot potato in your head. I completely agree with what you just explained, of course. So there's a question here for you in the Q&A. So it's short. I will read it so everyone can hear. And I would kindly ask you to give a brief answer if you can.
Sure.
Question. I'll adjust, how can we improve our communication skills, just like you managed to do it yourself?
Honestly, my very short answer, get out of your head. It's not that important. And so what I mean, I coach people from, executive coaching, like from industries. And so what prevents people from communicating, it's overthinking how it's going to be. You go in, and so I want you to think about communication from the evolutionary perspective and just kind of neuroscience perspective. You go in, it's you're just talking to 50 people, for example. Your body is in high alert because it's not safe and it's very dangerous. So being aware of your body reactions, that you are anxious and it's okay, and just really take it easy. I know it's difficult, right? But because we just put so much emphasis on us, like, how am I going to do? But as I said, it's all about audience. When you focus on audience, people want you to succeed. You'll see it. Like, you go into the audience and they just really want you to do good. And then because we just get in our head, what if I'm going to fail? What if something is going to happen? We just start overthinking. And guess what? It's like self-fulfilling prophecy. So if my answer is get out of your head and practice, it's going to be awful in the beginning. And then over time, you'll get better, 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 and better. And the confidence come next.
Okay.
I hope I answered. I hope I answered that.
I think so. I will finish, but I cannot resist in sharing a small nugget about myself on this. I also had my own struggles when I was younger. And what I did to overcome this communication issue was actually to join an acting course. So for 1 year long, I joined an acting course, and I was on stage at the end of that year, and it changed how I communicate and how I teach and how I stand in front of people. So there are many strategies. Yeah. First, we need to be aware, and then try to act on it.
Absolutely. And George, just kind of like this comment is, when I teach communication, I have several improv, like kind of acting exercises to just loosen people up, to get out of the head in their body. And thank you for this great example. If you can join improv on acting classes, I know it sounds really silly and terrifying.
It felt silly, but you read later, yeah.
Absolutely, 100% agree. Yeah. Well, thank you for listening. I'm glad that you were all engaging, and it was such a great pleasure to be part of this event.
So, Irina, Dr. Filonova, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for inviting, and have a wonderful 3-day weekend.
Thank you. The same. Thank you a lot.